I'll do 169 times 24.
This is how many hours.
Yeah, we hit so many discussions. That's not.
Right.
You got too many clicks now.
Good morning. Welcome to IECRIT at IETF 95. I'm Roger Marshall. This is Mark Linsner. And let's go through the chair side. Before we do, though, I'm going to pass around the blue sheets. And if we are missing a presenter, hopefully he'll show up and know to stand in the pink box. So, all right, goes without saying. That's right. We do need a note taker and a jabber scribe for today's meeting. These notes don't have to be elaborate, just quick capturing the decisions made. Is anybody willing to take notes? And we're essentially at an impasse until we get some. Oh, Christine, thanks. Okay, we'll remind ourselves and others to speak slowly. And how about a jabber scribe? No jabber scribe. Okay, well, we have at least to have a presenter. So we can go on without a scribe.
Didn't wake up in the bathtub. Kidney missing this morning, right?
Wow.
We were out. He left me walking late last night. So I assumed he made it back here.
Yes.
In the rain.
Then 2 blocks where I was.
We have a note taker, no jabber scribe. There's a couple people in the meet echo room. So let's go ahead and get going. Note well, hopefully if you're sitting in here and participating, you've read this. If you have not read this and you have a desire to participate, please read it and adhere to the note well rules. The agenda today is the IETF was rather generous in the time slot it gave us, so we're rather generous in the time slot we've given our presenters today. So 10 minutes for agenda bashing in the chair slides. That may go over a little bit. My guess is the next 3 20-minute time slots, that's a total of 60 minutes, may be more like 6 minutes. But
Yes. Certainly no more than 12.
So we'll certainly look forward to letting everybody out early, and you can take an early recess or whatever you want to call it. Anybody have a problem or an issue or want to discuss the agenda? Anything you want to add, take off? Speak now. So document status. So these are the 6 documents the work group is working on right now. We have the additional data related to an emergency call draft. That is in the RFC editor queue. It's in auth 169 times 24. It's been in auth 48 for 169 days now. And we're working out late comments, and the authors will update. This slide was made about 3 minutes prior to the authors actually uploading the new version. So that bullet up there is actually wrong. So there is a new version up there. It's actually generated a little bit of activity on the list. If you've followed the activity on that draft on the list, you're probably aware of what's going on. But I would suggest we can discuss it here if anybody has any problems with it and want to talk about it. It looks like Alyssa's going to try and make an explanation of why it's off 169 times 24. I should calculate that out.
Alyssa Cooper. I was just going to say there is a deadline for people to provide any further feedback on this because we want to get it back into the RFC editor's queue. So by next Friday, if it appears there's consensus to adopt the changes, then we're just going to go back to the RFC editor.
And the changes so far, we've gotten rough consensus from the authors and those participating in the draft. So. The next 2 drafts, next generation vehicle initiated emergency calls and next generation pan-European e-call. The authors feel they're ready to go to the ISG. 3GPP is working on requirements for a like service. We've learned that through both a liaison and comments to the list. So since we're ready to take that to AD review, IETF last call, IESG review, and then pub, instead of stopping and waiting for 3GPP as of right now, we're going to go ahead and progress the 2 drafts all the way through up to the request pub process. Before Alyssa's the AD shepherd on that, before she hits the button to pub request, we're going to resync with the 3GPP requirements and see where they're at and make a decision on that time whether to publish it or not. So that's what we're going to do with those 2 drafts. If anybody has comments on that or doesn't understand how that can happen, please speak up now and we'll explain that on the list, obviously, also.
Krista, I'm fine with that. Is there going to be an LS reply sent back to them indicating that? Okay.
We'll work on that on the list. We'll run that by the list before we send that. The next draft, data only emergency calls, we need reviews. We will start that with another working group last call right after this meeting's over. We did a working group last call a year ago on that draft. And we're going to hear a little bit from the author today. He's going to present on his latest. He's updated that, just a while ago, and we'll just hear what those updates are. So if we got any issues or if you haven't been keeping track, you'll be made aware of that today. A routing request extension for the held protocol. If you've seen the mail list this week, That is now RFC 7840. Yay, we got that done. And whoa, should plug this thing in, shouldn't I? So RFC 7840, that was an individual contribution into the work group in May of 2014. So in less than 2 years, we got that turned around. Okay. I'm back. Why isn't this thing back?
Can you reseat this?
It's coming. It just takes time. Okay, and then a lost extension to return complete in similar info. We've had several reviews on that from the public safety community, and it's in pretty good shape. We're going to take that to working group last call next week, and we're also going to hear about the latest changes in that draft. So that's our document status. Next, we'll take a look at the milestones, and if you've looked at our milestones and paid attention to the list, you've seen that they are magically lining up with dates that are pretty close to what we're meeting. So obviously the routing request extension is done, and the rest of it, as you can see, we just talked about those drafts, and we hope to be able to turn those and be within a month or two-ish of these milestones that are published. Okay. That's it there. And if I got to go back up and look at the agenda to see which one you got first. Data only. It's not coming up full screen. Hang on. Okay. So it is a different window for some
You're
reason.
doing did only?
I'm trying to. It's not cooperating. I got to get over here and take this out of full screen mode. So I can slide this over there and put it in full screen mode. Okay. If I remember the keystroke, I wouldn't have to look over your shoulder. Okay. Oh, that's me.
What is your system doing?
I have no clue. I am lost. I am literally.
Lost as a prototype.
I know. That's me though. Right. That's it, right?
Yeah, that's it.
Does that look better?
That looks better. So data only is a way to carry, it's the way to create a session that only has data. It's used for things like alarms, where you want to create an emergency call, route it like an emergency call, handle it like an emergency call, mark it like an emergency call, but it doesn't create an interactive media session. So we use message to do that. And we carry a cap message in the body of the SIP message. We had no objections on the working group last call, but we did get a comment after the last call about handling privacy. If that to the effect that privacy is subject to local regulation, and what works in one country may not work in another. That's a very reasonable comment, and I will create a new version and add that to the draft, no problem. There's a waiting constituency for this. This is something that we really want to deploy in NENA Next Generation 911, and we'd really like to go ahead. And I understand from that you wanted to run another working group last call on it?
Yes.
Okay. I don't
I
object,
looked up
but
the first one. It was,
Yeah, yeah.
It was 2015.
yeah, okay. So we can run it again. But it's really pretty stable, pretty simple. And with this privacy issue, which is just fine, I'll make that change. So I will put a new version out with the change that Keith asked for, and then we can work Google last call that one.
Right. Yep.
Okay. Questions, problems, comments on this? Okay. This one's really straightforward, and you know, other than that one issue that raised, I don't really think there ought to be any reason to not take this go ahead. It's a really simple thing. Okay.
Okay. That's your next one? Is that
Plan changes is fine. Yep. So this is deals with an actual real world problem that changes in the data that is used for routing, the thing that's in the loss server. There are a set of changes that have a schedule. They go into effect at a known exact time. The example that we canonically use is that that cities grow by annexation, so they take over an area that used to be not part of any city but part of an unincorporated part of the world, and they, on midnight at some day in the future, the city has a different different boundary, and the emergency calls that used to route to the larger community response now instead should go to the city's emergency response center. That kind of a change, that kind of a problem, which is a planned in advance change, isn't catered for in LOST. It doesn't have a way to do that. A consequence of making a plan change is that your validation information, the thing that when that validation may or may not be correct in the future. Cities often have, when a change like that gets made, it's not at all uncommon for the address to change because the community name changes, for example. But there may be other changes that come as a result of the city taking over that area. Very often, the rules for numbering streets are very lax in the non-city area. When the city takes it over, it enforces rules that says, no, it has to work this way. So they end up renumbering streets sometimes. There's lots of things that happen. So a location which was valid before the changes may no longer be valid after the change. The people who run the location information servers are aware that these changes are going to happen. They need to know whether or not it will be valid going forward. And you want them to do all their work before the change goes into effect, so that they can change anything that they need to. So what this thing does is it lets you say, is something valid as of a certain date? It lets you make a change to the database and say, this will happen on this date. And you can do a validation that says, well, if I was trying to validate it as of this date, would it be valid? It's a pretty straightforward thing. It adds a couple of parameters to the query and the response. And this is a practical problem. We have actually encountered, we encounter these issues regularly in complex emergency calling systems. So we need this. And several people have spoken up and said, yeah, this is a real problem. We really need to do this. A number of people have read it and have asked us to move this forward. It's still an individual submission. I'd like to adopt it, and I think it's pretty much ready to go. We have not had any substantive changes for a while. Bunch of little editorial nits and things that I've done. But it's a pretty straightforward thing. It just adds a new element to find service, which has a URI and an as of date to perform validation against. And then it gives you, I'm sorry, I've forgotten one more thing that it does. It also allows you it allows the server, the loss server, to let someone know that validation may change as of a certain date. So it can send you a message that it stores a URI against an address, and the validation will change as of some date. It'll let you know that that'll happen so that you know what to do. This is something that will be very useful. There's a secondary function that this this URI save with location gets you, which is also a practical problem which we'd like to solve, which is the issue that validation does change over time for other reasons other than the plan change. Plan change is the most common case, but it does change for other reasons. And right now, the only thing we say about revalidation is do it periodically, right? You know, just because it was valid, it may not stay valid. So we say, well, every once in a while, why don't you check to make sure validation is okay? Well, that turns out to cause more traffic in the loss server than anything else. Okay? And if you turn it up too far, you can swamp the loss server. So we want to turn that whole idea off and just let the server say, revalidate now. And then it can control the rate at which all those things happen. Okay, I've explained the document, I explained where we are. I made a request. I'd like to adopt this draft, and then I think I'll put out a new version, and I'd like to work with last call.
So how many people have read this draft?
Do it on the list. Well, do it on the list.
Right.
Do it on the list.
Okay,
Yes,
okay.
we're going to do this on the list.
All right, we will take that to the list.
Yeah, and I will, you know, I'm certain that a number of people will respond that they have read it and agree that it's ready to go.
And you're paying them how much?
I don't need to pay them anything. They looked at this and said, oh yeah, we need this. Yeah, well, they're implementers. They're people who are actually implementing this stuff.
Their email address.
Yes. I don't know if you've seen the IETF journal, but there's an article in it I wrote that talks about how that there are 50,000 emergency calls a month being routed with loss now. It is a success. We have multiple interoperable implementations of this thing. The last time I tried counting, I think there are 6 full-scale deployed implementations, not just these people are making companies making money selling these things, using them in real emergency calling stuff. This thing works and people are using it. And when we do that, we discover that, oh, gee, things we thought would be okay aren't, like this revalidate periodically, and it turns into most of the traffic in the server. Okay, so similar location. This is a little farther along. It is an IETF. It is an adopted draft, and we have had some risk traffic on this thing. Basically what it does is it gives you a way to return location information in the response and use it in 2 circumstances. One is when you have an invalid location, it'll give you a did you mean possible replacement value, just a suggestion, and then you can present that to a user, and they can say, well, yeah, that's actually it. I mistyped what I wrote, or so that's one term, but one place. And the other is that you can send in enough information for us to determine an absolutely unique location, but we would prefer that you actually use the full address. So, for example, if there's only one street in an entire state that has a particular name, and the only thing you give me is the name of the street and the state, you give me no city name, no municipality name at all, but it turns out to be unique, we can say, well, okay, you know, that's unique. I actually could route it that way, but would you please put the city name in this thing for me? And because that's what's stored in the list, right? We're talking about what do you store in the list. We want you to store the full address in the list so we can return that piece of information saying, well, we found this thing, it's unique, but you're missing the municipality name. Here's what we think the municipality name is. So once again, this has been reviewed. There are a number of people who said they really want it. Again, these are the implementers. In this case, I got some substantive comments on the text. And I did not get a chance to put all of those comments in the version that's currently on the list. I'm working on a replacement for that. I hope to have that in a few days, which will fix the other comments that I have. There's one person sent a whole bunch of comments, and I got some of them in, but I didn't get all of them in. So I need to do that. I need to put a new version out that has that addresses the comments the technical comments that we've got on similar. And I'm gonna, I think almost all of them, I'm going to do what he said, and then if not, I'll give him a response of what I
Okay.
did do. So I'm asking, so there'll be a new version, and I think at this point, is there another slide for this?
Oh,
No.
yeah, there is. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think this one had the second slide, it just says what I want to do. And I'd like to do a working group last call on that version.
Okay.
And again, I think, doing that on the list, because the people who are going to read it and review it are not here. They're going to be on the list.
Right. So both data only in this, you'll spin them.
Yes.
And when you do. with
Yes.
Working group
Right.
last call.
Right. Well, it's
Comments?
really all three drafts. It's one of them I'm just
Well, we
asking
have to
for
adopt
adoption
Right. So
first.
adopt the one
But yeah,
and then
okay.
working group last call the other two.
yep. Any questions or comments on this? All right, thank you. I'm done.
Which brings us to our last agenda item. This machine is confusing the hell out of me. Which is the futures of the work group. So what you've heard today is all of our work group documents should be done. We'll throw them over the wall within the next few weeks. They should be in IESG land, in the next month, in starting that progress. And we have one individual draft that Brian is asking we adopt as a work group item, which we will do that work on the list. So obviously with, if just let's pretend that is adopted as a work group item, that'll be basically by the end of April, middle of May, end of May, we'll have one document we're working on. So obviously in Berlin, at the next meeting, if that's the only document, we'll have to make the decision about with the ADs and what we do with the work group. So just wanted to put that thought out there if anybody had any ideas or, if we're contemplating any future drafts and wanted to spin them up pretty quick, it would be kind of now's the time.
Brian Rosen, so there are at least two things that I know of that need to come in. Once again, they're implementation experience. What I would like to see personally is that the work group stay in existence, but it doesn't have meetings, because I don't think our meetings are very fruitful, but our list is still useful. Having people who really are only occasionally reviewing, but when they do, we get some useful things, like what Keith did when he read it data only and said, look, privacy varies across countries, and some of this may not work in some countries. You need to say that. Yes, thank you. I appreciate him doing that. So I would like to keep it going. I mean, the list can always go, but I think that having the work group itself review and things like that is useful, but I don't think we need to meet. I think meetings are not being helpful to us.
And those are the type of discussions we'll have. Go ahead, Melissa.
I agree with that. Sounds
Okay.
good.
Right.
Well, I guess the other thing I was going to say is that we definitely, even if people felt that they just wanted to keep the list and not the group, if the chairs are overburdened, and that's kind of the difference between a group and a list, is that a group has chairs. We would keep the group until the documents are in the RFC editor's queue anyway. That's kind of what we tend to do, because in ISG evaluation, you definitely have times when you need to go back to the working group. So.
Okay.
And clearly, in this case, in the RFC editor's queue, you could also have times where you need to go back to the working group. So might as well keep the group intact until that time, at least, if not longer. But I'm totally fine with kind of keeping it in a dormant state. This is one where it seems like you can imagine things coming up in the future, and already having the group constituted will be useful.
John Peterson. So Brian, is there like other places where those people are who are actually discussing this are gathering in greater number than here? That just as a consideration. I mean, I know that there are, obviously this is different in different countries, and that's a dimension of this, but we could also be looking at, some kind of a transition plan, right? Where whatever procedural responsibilities the group has accrued for for lost and so on could be transitioned somewhere if there is a better place than here to do it. That's just a question. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, NINA is the obvious place to do it, and they're capable of doing standards documents, and we've gotten fairly decent at making decent documents. So, you know, could we do it? Yeah, I'm not sure that's really the right thing to do, and I personally appreciate the review, the occasional review that we get from people who have wider expertise within the IETF. So I don't think that's such a great idea. I prefer to do them here and then just sort of drag the NINA guys into the IETF process.
I mean, like James is at INA this week, right? So I think like, yeah, you'll continue to have NINA and INA, and the nice thing about us is that we're not jurisdiction specific. So I think that's important to maintain.
Okay, good discussion. I just wanted to plant the seed in everybody's mind that, you know, point out the obvious, that our work is winding down, and you know, if you have any thoughts around that, obviously the list is going to stay open, and we'll decide between now and Berlin if we're going to meet in Berlin, but that's a chair and AD discussion that we'll have. So any other comments? Open mic, come up and tear us apart. We have actually, what, 2 hours left if we want to. We did not ask for a 2.5 hour time slot. So it just happened that way. So ECRIT at IETF 95 is officially closed. We're done. Thank you, everybody. Sign the blue sheets if you didn't. I guess we have the room for a while too. But you have to go.
We do. What happens is the results of that.
Yes.
Thank you.
So, yeah, authority is citizens.
So disconnected somehow.
I know.
So I did not have the time to read the documents and see how far.
Yeah, our focus has been citizen to authority, like a 911, 112 like service. We really haven't entertained anything in the other direction.
I was thinking to form out.
Submit it. I mean, if you can submit it to us, we may deflect it back to dispatch. Okay. I don't know if you understand the hierarchy of the IETF, right? If the chairs and the AD decide that this isn't pertinent for what our work group charter is, we'll push it back up to dispatch. They'll decide what to do with it. What work group should be working. But if it's emergency related, obviously it makes sense to kind of put it in here. And that's what right. Right. It's more of, in the U.S. we have CMAS.
It's called WEA now. WEA, Wireless Emergency Alerts.
Where you can push, where authorities can push messages out to cell phones within a geographic area. And all cell phones, obviously it's an opt-in service. But all cell phones.
Smartphones. Using whatever.
Right, the WEA he's talking about is a cellular service, so it's only cell phones. but there's no reason it can't be into something else.
I think it's a subset of what is EAS, emergency alert system.
What I'm saying is the change is my intention is to contact users who are not subscribers and services.
Right, I think that's the EAS, emergency alert system. I think that's the umbrella, I believe. And that covers television, landlines, all kinds of endpoints.
Yeah, I mean, submit the draft. We've actually had discussions around that back when CMAS was spinning up.
Just give your opinion first.
Well, go ahead and submit it in a draft form. It can be any amount of detail you want to, but I mean, certainly convey what you're trying to do and what you would expect to happen in this group or the IETF with this work, what your expected outcome is. And then we'll